Hey guys, this is Tech Howdy. I welcome you to another video tutorial where we are building this CMS application using ASP.NET Core 3 and Angular 10. In the last video tutorial, we implemented the email service in our application. We tested sending emails using SendGrid and Gmail. If you haven't watched that video, I recommend you to go ahead and watch it before you watch this video tutorial. For the source code will be available in the video description. And in this video tutorial, we will be implementing and using anti-forgery tokens. If you are not familiar with anti-forgery tokens, what exactly is anti-forgery tokens? Anti-forgery tokens are used to prevent cross-site scripting in your application. So we have cookies in our application. So to prevent any third-party scripts that we use, like JavaScripts, or any uh, request being sent from third-party application using the information of the logged in user, like in this case using the user's cookies like access token, username, user ID. There are different cookies that we store in the browser's storage, which is the cookie. And if any third-party script or some malicious code tries to access these information and tries to use this information to fetch information about the user or the application, then we need to make sure first we authenticate each and every request that is coming in our application to make sure that this request is generated by the application and not from some third party website or third party script. So anti-forgery tokens are created in our application and attached to each and every request that are coming in. So these anti-forgery tokens are then decrypted by our application and make the application that makes sure that these anti-forgery tokens were created in our application and these anti-forgery tokens are valid. Then it will allow the HTTP request to process further. So we will see that in action, how we use the tokens and how we attach it to every request so that we are making sure that all the requests that come in our application are generated from our CMS application and not from some third-party website. So let's go back to our application and open the startup class. In the startup class, first thing that you would need to do is go ahead and add the service for anti-forgery. So we will use the add anti-forgery method and we will specify the option for header name. Here we are going to use this header name option. That's because when we will validate the anti-forgery token, so where, for example, when a request comes in to access the admin home controller, so before loading the home controller, the home controller will validate the anti-forgery token. So it's going to look for a header name which contains XSRF token, and then it will get the value of that header name and it will validate it because that's going to be your anti-forgery token. So we need to specify a header name for our anti-forgery token. Here I have put some notes which you can read why we use this and you can understand it. Now the next thing, in the configure method, we need to make sure that we add this anti-forgery token to every request or attach it to every request. So for that, we need to go ahead and set these options over here. Here I have added some options while I'm setting the anti-forgery token. Here you can see that I have created an array of URLs which contains the admin path, the store path, the cart, checkout, and login. You can add additional paths in which you want to attach the anti-forgery token. Here you can see there are some paths that have not yet been implemented in this application, which we will be doing as this application progresses. For now, we will be adding these paths. Just as an example, I have added additional paths. First thing, I get the path from the request. Then I create an array of my paths that I want to add the token on. Next thing, I also check if the path starts with Swagger. Swagger is something that we use to test our API endpoints. So if you have used it in the past, you will be familiar with what is Swagger. But if you have not, then you don't have to worry. You don't need to add this option because I use Swagger sometimes to test the API endpoints. Therefore, I have added Swagger as a path to the request validation. So you don't need to add it. But if you want to, you can. Next thing that I want to check if the path starts with API. So if any path request that is coming in and the request path starts with API, then I will attach the anti-forgery token. On every path, I will attach the anti-forgery token and make sure that any path that starts with the following URLs in this array that I have added, I will attach the anti-forgery token just to make sure that the anti-forgery token is present. Finally, I will get the anti-forgery token from the anti-forgery token store, get anti-forgery token set, and then next thing I will append it to the response cookie. Here one thing very important to note is when we are appending this token with the name XSRF token to our cookie, we have to make sure that the HTTP only value is set to false. And the reason being, if your HTTP only value is set to true, then the JavaScript will not be able to access the cookie. So any cookie over here where the HTTP only value is not false, so in this case all the HTTP values are true, so JavaScript cannot access this cookie. But if we set it to false, then JavaScript can access this cookie. So we have to make sure that the HTTP only value is set to false, so that if we want to access this cookie through JavaScript, because we are using AJAX to call backend APIs. So while we are using AJAX, we would need to access and attach this cookie to the header, and we are going to use JavaScript for that jQuery, which is JavaScript. And for that reason, you have to set it to false so that it can be used with JavaScript as well. So here I have set it to false and set the other values, and that should be it. All you have to do is call the next delegate and pass in the context. For every request now that you will make, you will have an anti-forgery token with the name XSRF token attached to the header. Now if I stop this application and run this application again, so the application is started. If I refresh this application now, as soon as I refresh, you will see a token is being attached, and you can see the token in the cookie of the application or in the browser window. If you go to your network tab, if you go to your developer tools and to the application tab, under cookies you will see the XSRF token. Now this token will be attached to every request that is made in our application. So every request that comes in will have this token, and how this token will be attached? It will be attached with this piece of code that we implemented here. So any path that falls under this particular criteria that we have implemented, it will attach the XSRF token, the token with the name XSRF, to the header. So now we have successfully added the anti-forgery token or implemented the anti-forgery token feature. But how do we use it? To use it, we have to implement attributes on our controllers. So we have not yet done that. So let's go ahead and attach some attributes on our controller classes so that we can attach these anti-forgery tokens or validate these anti-forgery tokens. So stop the application, go to the controller folder, go to API and open the any API that I want to access or implement the validate anti-forgery token. So I'll open the user controller over here. Here in the user controller, we have different methods. Now you don't need to add an anti-forgery token on the HTTP GET method. We are just going to implement it on the POST method. So the way we can do that is by adding an attribute called as validate anti-forgery token on the HTTP post methods, where I want to validate the anti-forgery token. I want to also do it on the put method as well, and I also want to do it on the delete method. So we don't need to add it on the get method. There's another way. What you could do is by implementing another attribute called as auto validate. So if I do this on the controller itself, so this will implement validation on all endpoints except HTTP GET, that is auto validate anti-forgery tokens. Or you can do validate anti-forgery token as well over here, but this will implement validation on your HTTP GET method as well. But just doing the auto validate anti-forgery token implements validation only on your HTTP post method. Since I want to do it on the put delete, I have used the anti-forgery token over here, and it's validating it's going to validate the endpoint requests and make sure that the token is present in the header, and it will decode the token or decrypt the token and checks its values. So if it's not able to decrypt the token, that means the token is either not valid or it was not generated on the computer or the machine where your application is hosted. So this is how you can implement it. But in an event you want to implement or for example you want to implement validate anti-forgery token at the controller level, and you want to ignore this, since I told you that it will implement the validation also on your HTTP GET method, there is another attribute that you could use is something like ignore anti-forgery token. So it will ignore this GET method. So you can read on these attributes on Microsoft's official website and get more information on it. So this was just a short information on how you can use this. So I've implemented them at the function level or the action method level, and I've put the attributes over here. So every time the request comes in, if there is no token, then we would not be able to access the data. Let's try to see before we attach the token by running our application if we are able to get the information, since we have now implemented validation of tokens. So let's go ahead and run our application. Application is loaded. Let's go to our admin panel, go to the users, all users, and now we have implemented the uh, token validation on the methods like get information for get user by username, edit user, add user. Sorry, not get user by username, but to add the user, sorry, to edit the user, to delete the user. So let's go ahead and try to delete a user or edit a user's information. So I'm going to go back here and try to edit this user. So let's change the add a middle name over here. So as you can see, I was not able to update the user's information, and I got an error saying user details could not be updated. That's because while I'm making this request, when I click the update button, I'm not attaching the anti-forgery token in the request. And since I'm not attaching the anti-forgery token in the request, I'm not able to make a HTTP put request that is updating these users' information. So now how do I fix that? For that, we have to go and add the token to the AJAX method that is calling the API endpoint, which is the edit user method. So we have to add the anti-forgery token in the header. So let's go ahead and do that. So we will go ahead and open the user.js file, which contains all the extension methods that we used with JavaScript to make these API endpoint calls. And here inside the method which we use to edit the user's information, which is the edit user method, here while we are attaching this data, that is the post data, we also need to make sure that we attach the CSRF token that we created in the cookie. So to do that, let's go ahead and first get the value from our browser cookie. So we need to get the value from our browser. So if we inspect network applications, we need to get this value using jQuery. So we have an extension method created inside this file called as getCookie. We are going to use this extension method. All we need to do is specify the name of the cookie in the parameters, and then it will fetch the information and return the value of the cookie. If it finds a value, it will return the value, else it's going to return an empty string. So if I go back to the edit method, here I'm going to add a variable called as CSRF token and call the get cookie method, which returns the token value. So once I have the value in my request body, I'm going to attach this to the headers. So I'm going to add an header property and attach the value to the header with the key XSRF token and the value as XSRF token, which contains this cookie value. So if I go back to the application and to the startup class, here I have specified under the services that the header name would be x-xsrf-token. So that's what I have done here. So if you go to the user.js file, I specified the header name and the value of the token. I could directly call the getCookie method here as well. I don't need to create an extra variable. Depends on how you want to. If you want to debug it, then you can set a breakpoint and look or check the value, but you could do it this way as well. So I'll save this. So now I've added this token on the JavaScript method. Let me try to run this application again. So the application is loaded. Let's try testing it. So we would have to do a hard refresh or hard reload in order for the JavaScript file to see the new changes on the JavaScript file that we made. So in case if you are not able to see the new changes, you could go to the uh, network tab and then check off this option which is called disable cache, because your browser is caching the files. So if you click this option and then you do a refresh, you will be able to see the changes that you made in your uh, JavaScript file. So now once these changes are in place, you can see the new changes. We have added the XSRF token to the header of the request. I'll go ahead and try to edit the user's information. Now I will go ahead and update this form. So I have filled out the form and I have updated the details. So I've also set a breakpoint on the method, that's the user controller, that's the edit user method, where we have implemented the validate anti-forgery token attribute. So if I go back to the application and now hit update, we should not receive an error. Technically we should be able to hit the breakpoint. So if we hit update, as you can see, now I'm able to access the endpoint. That's because I have passed the validate anti-forgery token test by the controller action method through this attribute. So we attached the token to the header. Once the request was made, the validate anti-forgery token class or the method will check for the token with the name XSRF in the header and it will validate it. If the validation is successful, then it will allow the request to process further and access this endpoint. If the validation fails, as you seen earlier, we received a 400 bad request, which means this method was not accessible to the request. So now we were able to hit the endpoint, and if I hit continue, if I go to the browser and check on the users page or user details page, I receive a notification which says success, which means the details have been updated. I've got a response. As you can see, the image also was updated. If I try to click back on the user information, or if I refresh and then try to click back as well, I still have the information retained, which means the information was updated successfully and the anti-forgery token implementation works in our application. So in this way, you can create and implement anti-forgery tokens in your application. So go ahead and implement these attributes on the methods that you want the anti-forgery token that you want to be added to the headers. So I will not be adding it to all these methods in this video tutorials, but you can go ahead and do it. I will add it and I will push the code in the DevOps repo. But if you want to manually test it, go ahead and try adding it on different controllers and try to test it. So if you have any questions, use the comment section and I will be happy to answer those questions. And The code once again will be found in the DevOps repo. The link will be in the video description. Do not forget to like and subscribe our channel Tech Howdy. Thank you.